Hey there, name's Alex, and I'm no economist, but I'm also not a poker player. And I do suggest that you stay away from gambling in general because it tends to ruin lives. And if you must have a vice, pick something else. Let it not be gambling. Do heroin instead. Now, seriously, don't do heroin either. That'll probably kill you very quickly. But to each their own, I guess. Who am I to judge? I tend to drink. I tend to drink, and I also play a lot of video games. And in general, you should not be taking life advice from guys on the internet. But regardless of whether you're into poker or not, it behooves you to be able to tell when people are bluffing with you. Just like you need to know when people are bullshitting you, like for the video we did previously, where we discussed how to tell if Russian commentators, pro-Russians, propagandists, or Rus simps, as I like to call them, are bullshitting you, and you need to know when they do. You also need to know when people are bluffing you, and how to call their bluffs. And right now, today, we're going to be calling the Russian nuclear bluff. The Russians have been threatening the use of nuclear weapons, be it tactical nuclear weapons against Ukrainian forces or Ukrainian population centers, or more generally, a fallout nuclear exchange with the West or NATO as a result of the war going so great for them that now a year and almost 8 months into to this war, the supposedly second ranked military power in the world is unable to defeat the supposedly 26th ranked military power in the world. Just for reference, my native Bulgaria is supposedly something below the 50th ranked military power in the world, and that's only brought up by recent equipment purchases or pledges of purchases, and the fact that we're a NATO member. And being unable to defeat Ukraine now more than a year and almost 8 months. The Russians are threatening nuclear escalation. First, why I think this is a bluff. First, I'm going to pull up the course of the Russian ruble. Just a moment. Yeah, as of the time of this recording, the Russian ruble has again surpassed. Just a moment for this to refresh. The Russian ruble has once again passed the mark of 100 rubles per one US dollar. And you can see how this has developed over the past year and even the past 2 years. And since I'm a not economist, but I can't not talk about the Russian economy. And it's very telling the exchange rate of the Russian currency, the Russian ruble, towards the US dollar looks like. And if we look at the exchange rate to the relative to the euro, it's going to show a similar picture, but we'll stick with the US dollar. And regardless of what some analysts may tell you, that a weaker currency may be beneficial if you have an export oriented economy. That's valid, or maybe valid, if you're China, but not if you're Russia. Because if you're China, if you're the empire under the sky, as they're referred to or they call themselves, China literally exports everything under the sky, whereas Russia doesn't so much. Russia is mostly a basic raw material exporter, and they have very little value adding exports. And they recently decided they're going to ban their exports of refined fuels. Not that anyone outside of Russia is buying their refined fuel products, but now they've also decided that they're gonna ban those exports because they're already experiencing in their country fuel shortages because probably a lot of their economy, and including fuel consumption, is going to support the war, and they've pledged that they're going to be spending 100 billion US dollars annually on their defense in air quotes because most of their defense spending and most of their military is tied up in the war in Ukraine, and they're going to be spending $100 billion annually for the next at least 2 years, waging that war in Ukraine. And that's going to be almost a third of their government expenditure, surpassing by far things like healthcare, social services, and the like. And that still only leaves them spending about as much as maybe Germany will also be spending in the few next years. And even though some analysts and some reports maybe want to convince you that the Russian economy has surpassed Germany in terms of purchasing power parity GDP. I think that's bullshit because no Russian is the average Russian is not richer than the average German, if, as people will like you to believe. If Russia is indeed the fifth economy by purchasing power parity GDP, I think those are confused metrics. And also, the war effort is going to be spending not is going to be uh, making up not just a third of the Russian government expenditure, but also a significant portion of their total GDP, and that's even a GDP of a war economy. And looking at the results of this war effort and where the Russian government military expenditure is going, and the poor performance of all other branches of the Russian armed forces in Ukraine, why do you think that Shoigu and Gerasimov haven't already stripped anything that's strippable from the Russian nuclear arsenal? And what we can see about the performance of all other branches of Russian military in Ukraine is, for example, that sailors from the Russian Baltic Sea fleet have been captured in Ukraine when their tank was damaged. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Sailors in a tank. Also, soldiers from the branches of the army that provide security to Russia's nuclear sites are also turning up dead or captured in Ukraine. And does that bode well for the Russian strategic nuclear forces? What reason do we have to assume that they're in any good shape and that they will be actually capable of launching a nuclear strike? I've joked in the past that if Russians want to nuke a major Western city, they'll have to smuggle the bombs in those cities by truck. Not that they couldn't try, maybe they'll have to resort to that. But what are they going to nuke? It's not like Putin and all of his inner circle and all of the oligarchs close to him don't have wives or even ex-wives or lovers or even children, be they legitimate or not, in places like New York, London, Paris, the French Riviera, or Rome. So, what are they going to nuke? Nowhere Kansas? I don't think so. And even if they decided they're going to nuke major population centers in the West, are they going to have time to evacuate their wives, ex-wives, lovers, or children on time? And will they be able to do that without alerting the Western intelligence that something's going on? I highly doubt it. And let's still for yeah, almost even though They may also try to use a tactical nuclear weapon somewhere in Ukraine against Ukrainian forces, but that's also not very likely because the resulting fallout may eventually spread over the Black Sea, over NATO countries such as Turkey, my native Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, and NATO isn't going to take kindly to nuclear fallout over any of its member states, and they may decide to retaliate. And it's generally assumed that a nuclear strike on Ukraine isn't going to weaken the resolve of the Ukrainians to fight and resist. Quite the contrary, even. There is some research that suggests that maybe a nuclear strike against Ukraine may even strengthen the resolve of the Ukrainians to fight and overthrow the Russian occupation. But still, let's for a moment assume that the Russians do indeed decide that they're going to go all in, all chips on the table, and do a nuclear uh, do a nuclear exchange with NATO and the West. I'm assuming that NATO has a better capacity for intercepting some missiles, but I'm assuming a lot of missiles will end up hitting their intended targets. But the US, the UK, and France have a capability to retaliate, and the Russian nuclear arsenal on paper only exceeds that of the US by a few hundred weapons, and both countries' nuclear arsenal is in the range of above 5,000 nukes. Maybe maybe Russia has more nukes than the U.S., France, and Great Britain in total, but still, there's probably going to be a lot of nukes hitting their intended targets, military installations, and major population centers on both sides. And I'm not even excluding that maybe China might decide that they don't like the Russians disturbing the existing world order and causing Armageddon. And even the Chinese may decide that they're going to retaliate to a Russian nuclear strike against NATO with their own nuclear arsenal against Russia. I'm assuming also that India and Pakistan won't get involved, but still, that will probably result in a major portion of the northern hemisphere being targeted with nuclear weapons and a lot of the population centers destroyed, and maybe between 10 or 50% of the population of the targeted countries or a lot of the northern hemisphere either dying instantly in the short term or in the long term as a result of nuclear fallout, radiation poisoning, uh, and later things like disease, contaminated drinking waters, collapse of supply chains for things like foods, and collapse of social and healthcare services. And that may result in the death of maybe even half of the population of the northern hemisphere. That will for sure be tragic, but I think that humanity will survive and potentially recover from the effects of the nuclear exchange, and maybe even be able to rebuild civilization. But one thing that the survivors and their descendants will remember for millennia to come will be that the Russians are barbarians who decided that because they couldn't have small pieces of land, even though they already control a sixth of the world's landmass, because they weren't able to conquer a few more pieces of land, they will end the world essentially. And the survivors of such an apocalypse remember them as the barbarians who controlled a sixth of the world and decided to end the world because they couldn't have a few more so a little more land. That's how the survivors will remember them. And so this is a heavy topic, a little maybe a little draining maybe a little draining on the mind to contemplate and discuss. But still, that's how I think it will play out, and that's what the Russians will win. Maybe if you're going to start the war that sends all the world back into the Stone Age, you're the winner if you're already starting from the Middle Ages. If you have less to lose than everyone else. That has been it for now for this video. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel. More videos are coming along. Drop me a comment below telling me your thoughts, what you think. And also glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes, and Russia delenda est.